Good afternoon, members and representatives from the Department of Public Safety. It is now 1:10 p.m., June 8th, here at the Jose Mafnas. This is Mafnas Memorial Building. With that said, I call this budget hearing into order. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce the members of the committee. We'll start with my far left, your immediate right. We have Representative Leila Staffler. She's the chairwoman for Education. To her right, we have Representative Christina Sablan, chairwoman for Health and Welfare. Next to her, we have Representative Selena Bavalta, the chairwoman for JGO. And then down to my immediate left, we have Representative Sheila Bavalta. She is the chairwoman for Natural Resources. Over to my far right, we have Representative Richard Azama. He is the chairman for PUTC. To his left, we have Representative Patrick St. Nicholas representing Tinian. To his left, we have Representative Danita Yantamai. She's the chairwoman for Commerce and Tourism and Cannabis. And so with 8 members present, that constitutes a quorum to conduct today's budget hearing. Assisting the committee, we have our legislative assistants, Mr. Giovanni Taitano and Cameron Nicholas. We have our legal counsel, Joe Tyrone, our IT personnel, Jonathan Diaz, and our sergeant at arms, Mr. Pete Tuan. Good afternoon, members again, and good afternoon, representatives from the Department of Public Safety. Today, we are gathered here to discuss the governor's submission. We have 2 versions. We have volume 1, which is the governor's proposal for how the general fund monies will be spent, or his proposal on how they should be spent, along with volume 4, which is the American Rescue Plan funds, which kind of brings the budget level to 2019. In addition to that, we will also discuss any federal monies that are awarded to the department, along with any revolving fund accounts and its balances, and to discuss the department's overall requests. Based on the fiscal analysis review of the submission, the department's request and the governor's proposal, it is shy of about 1.4 million. And so we want to hear what would that mean to the department, and in addition to how the additional FTEs are needed to kind of reduce the overtime expenditures that we've seen these past fiscal years. But before we begin, and before I open the floor to allow the representatives to provide the opening statements, may I just ask why the commissioner isn't able to make it today?
The commissioner is on Tinian. There was a pre-planned meeting. I believe they changed directors for DPS on Tinian, so he's there now.
Pre-planned. Do you know when this was planned? Because my memo went out on April 28th. Over a month.
I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you. With that, I did advise the members to go ahead and proceed with any questions that they may have. If I feel that your responses does not satisfy these questions, or further information is needed that you are unable to provide, then we will go into recess and schedule this hearing for another time when the commissioner can be available. And so with that, members, at this time I open the floor to you to provide any opening remarks you may have.
Good afternoon. My name is Kay Enos. I am the Director for Administration, Department of Public Safety. To my left is Director Juana Leon Guerrero, Motor Vehicle. And to my right is our Human Resources Manager. We're here to answer any questions any of you may have regarding our budget submission and the governor's budget submission. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Ms. Enos, your role at DPS?
Director of Administration.
And You didn't mention the HR's name?
Esther, I'm sorry, Esther Dallas Rages.
Thank you, Ms. Enos. I'll go ahead and just start off with a few clarifications before I open it up to the members. In regards to FTE, based on what was allotted for this fiscal year, how many vacancies do you currently have?
We currently have 6 vacancies. And they're all for police officers. It's probably, it could be the resignations that we've had. We've had about, I think, 3 in the last couple months, 3 or 4. So as they resign, we try and fill it.
So 6 vacancies, but from my understanding, you have a couple of individuals that are currently in academy?
Yes, we have 32 DPS employees who are police cadets right now. And it's been 2 months or about a month and a half since the commencement of the academy.
So what is the plan to employ these cadets after the academy is over? Seeing that you only had 6 positions that were vacated this current fiscal year.
Well, there are 32. 6 of it we paid for out of the community-oriented policing services. 15 of it will be paid out of the Insular Affairs TAP grant. It's like 21. And then the remaining was already vacancies that were there, so they've occupied them. We have vacancies that the cadets are not have not occupied yet.
So these are vacancies in addition to the 6 that you mentioned earlier. So
yes. Current vacancies are 6.
right.
We've had resignations after the academy. So they're still there, the vacancies are still there.
Okay, going back, how many total current FTEs does the department have as of today?
250. 250.
250?
Yes.
And this is within the 4 divisions?
Yes, 3.
3 divisions. Of the 250, how many is funded using the general fund? Because from what I see, based on at least fiscal year 2021, DPS was allotted about 213 FTEs. So what is funding the additional 37?
Okay, the general fund has like 213 employees. Of that number, I believe we have federally funded officers and civilians that are not included in that number. I think it's in the back of the submission.
Right, so of the 213, you said 21 of the remaining cadets will be funded through the general fund?
No. 15 plus 6 is 21. Those are all federally funded. The remaining 10 are, they will be occupying positions that were there that were vacant.
Under the general fund?
Yes.
So of the 213 that was allotted to DPS, you're saying about 10 or 11 were vacated. These FDs that are being funded through these federal grants, like the TAP, how long are these grants for?
Okay, so sex offender registry, that's an annual grant that the department applies for. Highway safety, that's also an annual grant, but that's not for police officers, those are for program managers. Then the motor carrier grant program, it's also annual and it pays for five police officers and a program manager. And then you have the COPS grant. This is the new COPS grant. The new COPS grant, which allows for 8 police officers, of which 2 of them have already been occupied.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Enos. Moving on to overtime expenditures. According to the fund status report, within the first and second quarters of this fiscal year, the department has incurred a total of about 1.3 million in overtime. And this is separate from any overtimes incurred as a result of COVID response. Can you verify if this information is accurate?
All overtime being paid for since last year has been COVID related. That overtime request, we request for reimbursement for those overtime costs. So far, we've received reimbursement for the first 4 or 5 pay periods since the inception of, or since COVID came around, and that's last year's pay periods 8 to 12. We are currently working on submitting the request for 14 pay periods, which ends on pay period 26. We are currently on pay period 13, so we still need to request pay periods 1 to 13. But all the overtime from last year, all of it is COVID related.
Okay, so this fiscal year, do you know how much in overtime was incurred non-COVID related?
Like I said, all overtime costs, I think it's very minimal, and it's only for those officers assigned to the FEMA site, which is the Cobblerville fire station. That's where they guard the FEMA supplies. We call it's a FEMA post, but it's not COVID related. Those are the only COVID costs that we don't pay.
Okay, so how has the department managed to reduce regular overtime, performing regular assigned duties, when in 2019 the department has incurred about 1.3 million in overtime, in 2020 about 1.6. So you're saying that currently the department has not incurred any overtime. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's been cut drastically, and so let's say for patrol, their overtime cost, it's COVID related because they're out there. I mean, they're out there conducting security at the sites, or patrolling for curfew restrictions, or whatever. But any additional requirements, for example, they're required to escort, let's say, the church. they offset those hours. So, and we monitor the time sheets really carefully. If it's not COVID related, it will not be approved. And since last year, their overtime costs have been limited to around 30 hours per pay period, per officer. You cannot go over that.
Okay, so I guess I'm just trying to understand here because let me just give you a scenario. At least with defense, firefighters are they're doing their regular duties. Anything outside of their normal duties, they bill to the, I don't know, whether it be the COVID task force, or these are hours that firefighters can earn on their own should they opt to work in these quarantine facilities. But what you're saying is that with DPS, any part of their regular duties is also working these quarantine facilities, and even their normal duties can be considered COVID related if they exceed the normal working hours. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Another thing I want to bring up is vendors. How much do you have in payables?
We're pretty good with the payables. It's only when there's no cash that they can't pay out. But we have a lot of we have a lot of federal grants that have not been paid either. It's basically non-payment all around. But in the last couple months, they've been paying off our vendors. Usually it's the repair and the fuel and the communication costs that cost so much at DPS. But those things have been paid.
What's your oldest payable account?
I think just maybe a couple months.
Thank you for answering those questions. At this time, I will open the floor to the members. I recognize Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Ms. Director Enos, Director Nyongorero, and Ms. Esther. Okay. Thank you for being here. I am troubled that the commissioner is not able to be here. We were hoping to meet with him to ask some questions and also get a better understanding of what the department's needs are for this upcoming fiscal year. You said that this was for a pre-planned meeting. Could you just, I'm just curious, what was this pre-planned meeting?
Well, they've been planning it out since last week. I'm not sure. But I do know that I don't want to discuss it so much. Tinian needs help right now.
Okay, so it's a meeting with who?
There's a change in the resident director. Okay. He was taken out immediately.
I see.
Yeah, so, we don't want to leave them running around alone. Mm-hmm. So it's him and the director of police and a couple of other staff that are there.
The stipend-based
yes.
Police. Okay, who's the acting, or is there an acting resident director now for Tinian?
Yes, it's Barbara Arend.
Barbara Arend, okay. And did the commissioner provide you with any prepared statement to share with the committee?
No statements. I guess, we're all here to answer questions regarding the budget, whatever questions you need.
Okay, when did you become aware that you would be attending today's budget hearing?
I always attend the budget hearing.
But to attend to represent the department instead of the commissioner, when did you become aware?
I don't know.
When did he tell you that he couldn't make it?
I don't know. Last week? I don't think so.
Last week, okay. Well, in any case, I do have a few questions. I'm hoping one of you will be able to answer. So could we just clarify whether all of the furloughed officers have been returned to duty?
Yes.
All of them, okay. And there were like 11, right, last year?
Yeah, just enough.
Okay. And everybody has been restored to
yes.
full hours? Okay. And I have a question about DPS's vehicles. How many vehicles do you have in the department's fleet now?
We have 144 vehicles.
144.
Yeah, that does not include those survey vehicles, but that includes everything from gators to motorcycles to command vehicles, SWAT vehicles.
Okay. On Saipan, Sinian, and Rhoda?
No, Saipan only.
Saipan only. Okay. And a surveyed vehicle, I'm sorry, what does that mean?
So, the vehicles run around 24 hours a day. So sometimes, they're overworked. So we have to survey them. Or they could be over 200,000 miles and we have to survey them. Or they could get into accidents. So, we survey them. We just always measure would it be costlier to fix it and to survey it, or vice versa.
Okay, but I'm sorry, when you say you survey a vehicle, that means you're removing it from the fleet and turning it over to another
procurement.
department?
We turn it over to procurement.
Okay.
A lot of times we survey, like for police vehicles, we survey them and then keep them for parts, because we're always submitting or turning in vehicles to repair shops.
Okay.
So it could be a patrol vehicle and it's still there at the impound lot through procurement. Procurement services.
Okay, so how many vehicles have been surveyed
Or
are in procurement right now?
there's a lot. I don't have the exact number now, but there's a lot. Basically, they're out of service.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned that repairs are a pretty significant part of DPS's costs. What does that cost to maintain a fleet of 140 some vehicles?
It's all dependent on the vehicle. So a vehicle can have a transmission problem.
But just for the annual expense, what
You're asking what the annual expense is?
Yeah.
300,000 or more.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay. How many vehicles did you have to survey last year?
I don't have that list right now.
Okay. Is DPS able to account for all of the vehicles in its inventory?
Yes, and when we survey them, they take it out of our inventory. So we don't really have to account for those surveyed vehicles. It's up to procurement what they want to do or what they're allowed to do. They can auction it out, but usually when we request for survey, we mark, there's a list of things. So you could say scrap metal or, no use at all, or,
Okay. And what are the funding sources for procuring new vehicles? So I think the department just recently purchased new vehicles, right?
Yeah, so we purchased 17 new Chevy Tahoes. That was from reimbursement money from Typhoon U2. It was reimbursement for the use of DPS vehicles, their mileage, their fuel, and so we were reimbursed 1.4 million for that.
Okay.
The other 8 or 9 or 12 vehicles, 2 for Rhoda, 2 for Tinian, came from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration grant. That's for traffic.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think those are only new vehicles.
Okay. I think that DPS also received some vehicles through the IPI Community Benefit Fund,
Yes.
right? Like 15. How many?
I don't know. That's like maybe 2 years ago.
It was a couple
Almost
of
3
years.
years.
Are those vehicles still part of the
Yes, they
business
are.
fleet? They are. Okay. So like 15 vehicles.
Yeah.
So as you bring in new vehicles, you survey.
We survey the older ones, like 2000 Ford Explorers and.
Okay. And are you familiar with the OPA vehicle audit that was conducted in 2020? Did you participate in that review?
I do know that OPA went down there and did a inventory of the vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's the one you're talking about.
Yes, so that was.
Then yeah.
So that report was published. It's a 2020 report, and they looked at vehicles belonging to other agencies, of course, but But DPS had the bulk of a significant number of the vehicles that were surveyed. And then there were some issues that were identified as part of this audit, right, including vehicles that weren't properly accounted for. There was misuse of vehicles, vehicles that were tinted when they shouldn't have been. I mean, there's a whole list of concerns that came out of this audit. You haven't seen the report, okay. So there hasn't been a department review of ways to improve how vehicles are tracked and.
No, we haven't seen the report, and I'm not sure if the commissioner has seen that report. But I do know that they came down there auditing, I guess, the vehicles.
Right.
Their information, do they have their registration and all of those things, so they did come there.
Okay, so but if there was a review of how can the department improve the way it tracks the vehicles and make sure that they're being used appropriately and all of the issues that were identified by OK, would you be the person to oversee that process, or who would do that?
Most likely.
Okay.
It's the commissioner, and then we have a logistics chief. He'll probably be involved in that. But if it's for inventory, we're the ones who keep the inventory. Yeah, he will be the chief, and maybe internal affairs or something. So I don't know.
Okay. And the logistics chief is
person.
Yeah.
Person. Chief, Assistant Chief Joaquin Camacho.
Okay. Thank you. And then I guess my last question in this line, just to clarify, you said it's about $300,000 annually for repairs, and what about just regular maintenance? Does DPS have a program for regularly maintaining vehicles?
So we encourage them to service their vehicles like every month, because this is for patrol vehicles every month, and it costs around $100 per service. We just send them down to wherever we have an open account, and then they just turn it in for service there.
Okay. So they are all the vehicles are being maintained on a monthly basis.
We pray.
It's up to the individual officers.
Yeah, no, we always, sometimes they just become so busy, and they, otherwise, majority of them do for it.
Okay, but that $300,000 that you mentioned earlier, that includes the monthly maintenance
Yes.
costs? Okay. Thank you. I yield for this round, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Rep. Sablan. Now, just to clarify some of the questions that Rep. Dina brought up, what would you say is the average age of each vehicle?
Now, I guess the newer vehicles we have, aside from the 2020, the newest ones were in 2017 or 2018. That's maybe around 3 years. And then, these vehicles age faster at DPS, especially if they don't, just sit around, aside from, like, for example, one vehicle for administration that's just used to route papers and stuff. Those patrol vehicles, they age faster. They break down all the time. Air conditioners, transmission, where they get into accidents, have to replace everything, It's very expensive for each vehicle. And yeah, it's about 3 or 4 years that one of the latest ones. We still have vehicles that are 20 years old. We try to survey them all out because we don't want to keep paying for maintenance.
Has there been research done as to the types of vehicles used in responses? I mean, not to discredit Hyundais but when you talk about the lifespan of these vehicles and the wear and tear on these vehicles, have you looked at what are much more reliable vehicles for these kind of operations, so that they can have a longer lifespan and probably cheaper in maintenance costs or anything like that?
Well, when we acquired the 2017 vehicles or 2018 vehicles, we put them out for bid. Whatever whoever bids and whatever vehicle, that's what we take, regardless whether we like it or not. So we had, and I don't want to discredit those vehicles either, but a lot of those vehicles have been surveyed because they keep breaking down, or they're too small, or they're too slow, or all of the different reasons. But it's not a choice. We don't have a choice as to what kind of vehicle we want to get unless it's specialized. So like the Chevy Tahoes that we ordered, they're full police packages, sirens, lights, cages. They're built for police response.
All right, thank you. Floor is now open. I recognize Rep. Lizama.
Thank you, Chairman, and welcome to your staff. In line of the question that Rep. Saban, Chairman, I've seen lots of vehicles on Middle Road, and it seems there's only one shop that's been targeting you guys to turn in your vehicles for repair. Is that appropriate? I mean, is that the only shop that can do, and if they've been sitting there for weeks and weeks? When the vehicle came from Triple J, they have the parts there. So what is the reason for them to be sitting there that long? Can you tell me?
I'm not sure. I can't answer that. But usually when we go to vendors, a lot of these vendors, they help a lot. And usually when we require, let's say, emergency assistance, they provide emergency assistance. We don't pick and choose actually where we go. If they're available, we go there. I'm not sure. I've not seen the vehicles on the side of the road or at the shops. I don't come down this way a lot, but
I do. Yeah. Because I go to the PX a lot and I see them all the time. So that tells me that the vehicles are not properly maintained by each driver. So what kind of training do you give to the driver? Is there any annual training? Do they know how to pull maintenance, whether the vehicle isn't it's in time for a vehicle service and they just passed it and until this breakdown? What was the reason? This is where the budget comes in, and we need to know that. So what kind of training do you give to the drivers? I mean, are the drivers are properly trained on how to identify issues, problems on the vehicles? I mean, are they doing what they were supposed to do, or just get on a truck or get on a vehicle and boom, gone?
No, they conduct inspections on these vehicles. I've seen officers in the morning, with their hood up because they're checking the oil or whatever. If it's a little deeper than that, then they turn it in.
So there's a record.
They're not mechanics. Yes, they do inspections every patrol shift. You have a shift commander that goes out and says, or checks that your uniform is all, in order, and then you make sure that they check if they have oil or water in their windshield, or, if they see something hanging from the car, they call logistics, or if somebody hit it, you call traffic. You need to report these things. And we're pretty good about, being on top of them when these things happen. They have MVCRs, motor vehicle condition report, motor vehicle condition report, that they fill out for every driver. You fill out how many miles you went, or was the left side mirror missing, or that's the responsibility of the officers. And if we find out, like me as administration, and I find out that there's a car out there with a flat tire, we're gonna go back to those MVCRs and we're gonna see who is the last person, because it is the responsibility of the driver to make sure that the vehicle is not transferred to them if something is wrong with it. But these guys are not mechanics, so they don't really know. But I'm sure they can check their oil and their, water, whatever. But like I said, anything deeper, they have to turn it into the repair shops.
Anything like mirror, just mention mirror, it becomes unserviceable and it's not operable. A policeman should have a mirror on both sides to go and work. So that's automatically what you call dead.
Yes,
You cannot operate it.
you have to go fix it.
But you mentioned to me that there's an emergency service that you would ask this particular shop. A shop like that, and those vehicles did not come from that shop. Those vehicles came from Triple J. Hyundai is Triple J. Emergency should go to them. Why not? What is the problem? I mean, you're talking about vehicles that are needed out there for the police to do their work, and they are not capable because they don't have enough vehicles. What is emergency to you? I mean, emergency shop is to me is the dealer that sells those vehicles.
But you gotta understand that some things the dealers don't have time to, we don't just go in and say, can you fix that? It's broken, they won't. And I'm not saying all the dealers are like that. I'm just saying that a lot of these repairs, they want it done yesterday because they need it out in the streets. And I'm not sure why they go to that dealer you're talking about, or shop, or wherever. Wherever they can repair their vehicles, we tell them go and get a quotation for it. You know what I'm saying? We pay for everything, but we tell them you need to get a quotation for it. We don't know where they go to, and we don't require them to go anywhere. I mean, just to this and to that.
I want to stay within the budget question, but I know that in the past, even the fire, what do you call that? Fire lane and Ganapan, they only been using the same record, and I hope it's not happening with you guys. That's the reason why I brought this up. Now, my other question is, when you have someone, a police officer, got into an accident, what procedures do you have? Do you drug test them? Do you get them to, because you're talking about some vehicles got into an accident. So what is your procedure when you have someone got into an accident? Where you put him on, I know you put him on the administrative work until further investigation is done, right? So can you explain the procedure where do they get drug tests after they get into an accident? Do you have that policy?
No, so if an officer gets into an accident, first they go on traffic. So they determine if they're at fault or if they're not at fault. But that driver will automatically be grounded, that's what you call it, grounded until they go through the emergency vehicle operating course again. All officers go through that course. And so, if they get into an accident, if it's their fault, then they pay for it. And then they go through that course again. If it's the other person's fault, we go after that person, and usually it's insurance. Okay, and we don't pay for it all the time. After 1 or 2 times, then you get suspended, or you have to pay for the whole amount. It's a policy that it's at the office, and I can't really read it out or say it out right now, but that's what usually happens. So we do charge these officers or the private parties that caused the accidents.
I yield back, Chairman, for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Lizama. I now recognize Rep. Staffler.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you so much for joining us today. I have some questions about voting safety, which I know is federally funded, but with how all funding kind of connects to each other, there's some things that stood out to me that I wondered if you could answer. To start with, it's a federal fund, so it's an annual grant, I'm assuming? Does the funding level change year to year?
Yeah, if there's more money available, they give us, but the average amount is around 600,000 some. If we don't finish the money, we can transfer it on to the next year. So like currently, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the grant is 600,000 or 800, I'm not sure.
In this, it says 452,000, and what's left available for 2022 is 176,000. I will try and get you one copy. Okay, So I was curious, how many FTEs are under that division?
The section.
Yes, the
voting.
section, my bad.
How many
How many?
federally funded
Yes.
or how many?
Well, okay, how many locally funded and how many federal?
I think there are 2 federally funded, but they're not police officers. That's the program manager and the vessel registration technician. There are 10 or 12 police officers assigned to that section solely. They can't do anything else. And the reason why is because we match that grant. Their salaries match that grant.
Okay. Where would I find that in the local budget? I guess that indicated specifically that there are 10 FTEs that are at voting safety in your local budget?
No.
No. Okay.
Because our local budget just lists it down as police officers.
Understood.
It's the grant that lists them.
So, how many, let me see here. I noticed that there isn't a budget for fuel under the federally funded budget. Where does the fuel come from for voting safety?
All fuel comes from the local account.
Okay. How many boats are operable, including Tinian and Rhoda? 6 boats. 8 to 6 boats. How many are in Tinian? How many in Rhoda? How many in Saipan?
There's one, the Rhoda and Tinian have, I'm not sure if they're here yet, but I know we got them 1 boat each, new boats. And then I believe there are, I can't really say. But I can get that information.
So if there's maybe 6 boats, then maybe there are 4 boats in Saipan as a possible number.
Yeah, but not a lot of them. I mean, these boats break down constantly, so 2 of them can be just sitting around. And then we don't have a lot of auto marine shops on island, so it's very hard to repair. And a lot of these things require off-island parts or.
So my next question was, how many boats are not working? That you know for sure.
I need to get that information. I don't really want to say. I'd rather get that information and forward it to you.
Okay. You do not have a mechanic on staff as part of your federally funded program?
No.
No. Okay. So in the federally funded budget, it has a plan there's a equipment budgeted at 162,000. What kind of equipment are you guys planning on buying?
Those are the boats.
So that would be for a boat. So there's another plan to buy another boat?
So some.
It hasn't been expended yet. Actually, that would.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
I think it has been. When was that?
This is shoot.
Can I get a copy of that?
Submitted as of April 1st. There's 160K that has not been spent yet. And.
You mean not been spent, or is it encumbered?
It's available. It could be encumbered. It doesn't say.
Because I know that we're waiting on some, I believe 2 boats. These are contracts from off-island. So we've also purchased engines to replace older engines.
How often do you have to replace engines?
I'm not sure. A couple of years. I'm not sure.
I noticed your all others budget is very big. What do you guys use the all others budget for? There's total was 388K, and what's left is about 180K. So what do you guys spend all others on?
Can you get a copy of that? I can't really talk. I can't see it.
Okay.
No.
Can you make a copy? All right. So knowing that fuel is a local cost, has any fuel been used to transport the governor or his family to any other island, be it Managaha, Rhoda, Tinian, or the Northern Islands?
I don't know the answer to
Recently, there was a rescue up in the north near Sarigan. The capsized victims were placed on a passing container ship rather than the boating safety returned them back to Saipan. Why were they not taken back by the boating safety boat?
I can't answer that, sorry.
Considering fuel is paid for by local. I think that's a good question to ask. Okay. I guess I wish that the commissioner was here today because those are questions that maybe he would have answers to. I think it would be a good thing to have him come back to answer some of these pressing questions. Local funds, especially fuel, are mounting as the fuel prices go up. I know that there's also been a recent purchase of a forklift for boating safety. What do you guys use a forklift for, if I may?
That's not boating safety. That was locally funded.
So that's locally funded. So what do you guys use a forklift for boating safety?
We don't use it for boating safety. It's
located down at the boating safety area?
Yeah, well, we use boating safety to store a lot of our things because our impound lot is currently full. Procurement puts their vehicles in our impound lot, so it's not just DPS down here. Where we usually store it because we don't use the forklift all day long. But I don't know of a operation from boating safety that required them to use the forklift. It might be stored there in their warehouse.
Thank you.
But that was purchased, and that was purchased solely for the logistics section who uses it at the impound lot.
All right. I've yield for now. I hope that the DPS commissioner can come and answer some of these in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Staffler. Before I move on, I just want to bring your attention to the federal grants or awards that were given to DPS. What I have here there's about 5 listed here. The Motor Carrier Safety Assistance Program, the Highway Safety Programs, Recreational Boating Safety Programs, Community-Oriented Policing Services, and the Adam Walsh Implementation Grant. Total comes out to $2,206,636. Can any of these grants be used to fund the shortfall from the governor's proposal?
No, those grants are specific. The Recreational Boating Safety Grant can only fund boating safety activities. Motor Carrier Safety Assistance Program can only fund commercial or police operations for commercial vehicles. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration grant can only fund the traffic section. The Adam Walsh grant can only fund sex offenders, not sex offenders. Police officers that go after these sex offenders. The Community-Oriented Policing Services, that's the grant that funds the police officers. So I think we're closing up with J7. With the last one, and so our current one, that's where the cadets will be hired under. What else? Those are the only big grants.
So of the 1.4 allotted for all others under this grant, none of them can be used to supplement some of the all others under the department's request?
No, because usually so the department's request takes care of anything that cannot be paid for by federal funds. So, like they say boating safety, they get $600,000 a year or $800,000, that can only fund boating safety section. It cannot be used to fund patrol or, other sections of the department. They're specific, unless we have a grant that's open for all law enforcement. Otherwise, those are specific grants.
Okay, so during the reduction in force or the austerity period, how many of your locally funded FTEs were transitioned over to these federally funded positions?
So currently we have 25 police officers getting paid for, half of their salaries getting paid for by a COVID grant out of the Criminal Justice Planning Agency. We also have, we moved 2 officers that are assigned solely to the sex offender registry section. We moved them to the grant. We moved, yeah, those are the only ones. We cannot move them just because we want to. We usually get approval to move them first. And if they say you can't, then we can't.
Okay, but so you gave me 25 that were partially funded, 2 that were moved from the sex offender program. But how many do you have that became fully funded through these federal grants?
I think only 2, the sex offender ones. And the 50%, that's only, we just got a grant from the CJPA. They got that grant to assist us with the downsizing. So they allowed us to, they only allowed us to pay 50% of their salaries. And that's a 2-year program, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, well, because it seems like, well, I think there were quite a few from Rhoda that weren't in the general fund budget that I see in the federal funds budget. So I think it's more than 2, and this is something that if I can ask you to look further into and see, because once you move them over, it opens up a vacancy in the general fund. And so once we fill that, then we're gonna go through the trouble of when these grants run out or expire, then we have the issue of bringing them back in. Yes.
Okay,
so if you can provide the committee.
I believe one officer from Tinian and 1 from Rhoda is getting paid out of the sex offender grant.
So no one from Saipan was transferred over to?
No, they've been there. So we've had officers there.
What I'm asking is,
How many did we
transferred over
transfer?
during the furlough period, within the last year? Not
Only
from
the
Saipan?
Tinian and Rhoda, 1 each.
So the rest were funded 50-50?
Yes.
And in regards to your revolving funds, how much has the department collected since the start of the fiscal year?
I need to get that information for you.
How much has the department collected in the last fiscal year?
No, I don't have that number right now.
Do you guys use your revolving funds to supplement any shortfall in general fund?
Yes, we do.
But you
So
don't have
usually-
the figures with you today?
They're actually in there. They're in the printouts.
Because from my understanding, last fiscal year, the department was only given about 4 million, with the understanding that all the reduction in hours for these police officers would be supplemented with the revolving fund accounts that the department has. So
If
you have
want to
any
read
information?
every one of them, I'll read them right now. They're here. It's not a lot.
Okay, but how much have you collected last fiscal year?
So it's all dependent on, so let's say got an impound lot account, revolving account. We only have $4,000 there. We have the range account, there's like $12,000 there. We have the driver's license ed account, there's $59,000 there. They're like little money all around. whatever it was that we were funding these short posts with, they're not these accounts. So we have the, I guess you could say the non-essential account where we provide non-essential services or non-essential services that require police. We provide them and then they pay and then it gets deposited into that account. I think that's a 3560 here. It's like 74,000. Yeah. And I don't know where they got these balances from.
Who got these balances?
The general fund submission.
Okay, well, if that's something that you can prepare just to give the members an understanding of how much is collected, because in essence, that's additional operational funds for the department, which is important to the committee's deliberations to see how much of the revolving fund account can supplement your operations. And so if that's something that you can provide, how much was collected, even just within last fiscal year, how much did the department need to use out of that, along with how much was collected up to today since the start of this fiscal year. And if that's something that you can provide the committee, I'd appreciate your assistance with that. And so with that, I now hand the floor over to Rep. Abata.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going back to the beginning, it was a bit confusing. Hearing you have, when they asked you how many vacancies you had 6, you said. But in reality, you have 16 at least, because you said there were existing, pre-existing vacancies, right? So at least 16, right? And you have 32 cadets. You said you had 8 positions under COPS grant.
6.
You said 2 were already occupied.
Yeah.
So 8 total.
Okay.
2 were occupied. And then you mentioned there are DPS employees that are cadets currently. How many DPS employees on board now are cadets?
You're not asking how many cadets.
No.
How many DPS employees?
How many DPS employees currently on board now are going through the academy? 4. So these 4, what was their position at DPS prior to being cadets?
They were dispatchers.
Dispatchers, so they've already been getting paid and all that, right?
Yes.
You have 32 cadets going through the academy that has been ongoing for at least a month and a half. How many of those cadets have been paid their salary?
They're already paid. All of them.
When did that occur?
The last payday.
Okay, because I bumped into a mother and she said,
They got
that's fine. Okay, thank you. That's all that. You mentioned that you were able to procure, DPS was able to procure 17 Tahoes with full police package because of a reimbursement from FEMA for Super Typhoon U2 amounting to 1.4 million. How much was the total cost of the vehicles?
$800,000
for the vehicles, and then shipping?
Yes, that one is shipping is separate. It's like $3,000 per vehicle for shipping alone. Then we have wharfage fees. We have stevedore fees, and so those we used to pay.
So all the 1.4 million reimbursement from FEMA is gone. Is it? It's
No.
account.
No, there's still money.
Okay.
That reimbursement was not given so we can replace the vehicles.
Okay,
We're
what was
just
it for?
using it to pay. It's reimbursement for using our vehicles.
Okay,
No,
okay, I
department
understand,
vehicles.
I understand.
So, we claim mileage and whatever, and then they reimburse us. So it's just reimbursement. The
Okay.
department has decided to use it to purchase new patrol vehicles.
You mentioned 3 divisions or programs of the DPS. What are they? Police
Oh,
Right.
police, administration, and motor vehicle.
and motor vehicle. So where does boating safety fall in?
It falls under the commissioner's office.
Okay. I'd like to recommend,
I'm here.
Never mind.
I'm here.
I'd like to recommend that we call in boating safety. I have a lot of questions for them, but proceeding with questions for DPS. In the last, I would say 3 years, how many police officers have been assigned as personal security detail for the governor and or the first lady?
I don't know.
I know they rotate. I recommend to the chairman that we call the commissioner in as well, so we can get an answer to that. How much of overtime has been incurred by these personal security details? Do you know? No, you don't. How many vehicles are assigned currently to the governor and or the first lady from vehicles that DPS has in their possession? How many of those DPS vehicles are at the disposal of?
3, but that includes the vehicle assigned to their security.
Their primary security detail?
Yes, the one at the house. No, they don't drive around there at the house.
Okay, so one is assigned strictly for that person who is stationary at his
It's a
residence.
section, they take turns to guard the house.
Yeah. I'm familiar. And then 2 others at his complete disposal, the governor.
I'm not sure. I do know that the vehicle is belongs to bills.
All 3.
Yes.
How many DPS personnel are currently assigned to the governor as security details, and how many are to the his spouse, Mrs. Torres?
I am not sure. I do know there's an entire section, and I have to go and look at the schedule first.
Would the HR director know? How many police officers are currently assigned as security detail to the governor and or the first lady?
I understand that they do have,
Can you turn on the mic? Yes.
I understand that, they do
No.
have,
Or this, or Alafangat is on. Thank you.
I understand that I think they do have a schedule with, patrol for these detail officers.
But you don't know how many?
No, so there's a bunch of them. It's code .1 section. That's the governor's post.
Yes.
Yeah, those are, they take turns.
Right.
One of the post officers could be his driver, but he is assigned a security detail.
More than
person.
one security, not a security detail,
No,
but
one person.
more than.
And then if you.
And then the other one is stationary, right?
Yes,
You said,
yeah. So there's like maybe 6 or 8 people at the post take turns.
Okay, in shifts.
Yeah, because it's 24 hours. Yes.
It's a 24-hour assignment. And then they also get to travel with him, is that correct?
I don't know. I'm not sure. His security, not the ones at the post.
Do they incur overtime when they travel? I mean, they're DPS personnel, so you would see their time sheet,
Yeah, I've
right?
seen, but I don't think so. I need to go back and, there's a lot of employees, they can't really.
So you don't know how many in the last 3 years have been rotated out of these post shifts or assignments?
Well, I don't know, because it's an actual section, it's under.
Under DPS.
Patrol,
Okay,
yes. So if you take one out, you just put another patrol officer in. It's a section that, you're in shifts.
so let me understand this correctly. So there's not a pool of police officers that are assigned strictly for that, let's say for the whole year. And the reason I ask that is because for security reasons, you have to have a set of individuals. You can't just pull anybody from patrol for security reasons. If that truly is the purpose, is to guard the security and provide security, it would be a specific pool of people, and you can't just randomly bring in unknown individuals. That's my understanding of a personal security detail.
But they're not actually personal security.
Well,
They just got-
they're listed on their documents as personal security detail. They're listed in the
what
governor's
documents?
budget
I don't see,
as
Predictive service,
yes,
yeah, right?
yes.
Yeah, okay, that one, yeah. But.
But that's under DPS, right?
Yes, but that's only the driver. The ones at the post,
Mhm.
they're regular police officers.
They've been referred to in many documents. I have seen the security detail to the governor.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
they guard in his house, so it happens, right, for every governor, you have to guard their house. Those are those officers there. He has a driver,
Mhm.
and he's the executive protective service detail. There's only two of them.
And is that what is listed in their position
Yeah.
with DPS, executive security detail,
Protective service.
or whatever title, but it's specific to the governor? Does the lieutenant governor get a security detail?
Yeah. Yes, one.
How many?
One.
So that's his driver, his security detail.
Yes.
Does his house have a post?
We're only required by law to provide 24 hours security at the governor's house.
I'm not mistaken, that's not a law, but you could be right.
Yeah, I think it is.
I will yield for now, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Rep. Selena. Now, before we move on, can I just ask for a I have a clarifying question. Earlier you mentioned that the commissioner went to Tinian due to a sudden change in leadership. Is that correct?
In Tinian.
Due to a sudden change in leadership?
Well, I don't know, he's there for a meeting, and I know that they changed.
Isn't that what you
directors.
mentioned earlier? Because there was a sudden change in leadership.
Well, I don't know his reasons for going to Tinian, but he's there for one, I know he's there because they changed the resident director. And she is requesting for assistance.
But
That's all
earlier,
I know regarding that.
earlier you said it was a pre-planned meeting, yes?
Yes,
So this was planned way in advance
I'm
for
not
the
sure.
change in leadership. And
I'm
you
not
do
sure
not
that's
know
what
when this pre-planned meeting was scheduled? Are you 100% sure that the commissioner is on Tinian?
Is in Tinian? Yes, I am.
And the reason I ask this is because I had an individual contact the commissioner's office, but they said he was out for lunch. So I wanted to see.
Well, I answered that call. Is it regarding the firearm?
No, this was during our meeting.
Oh.
And so I just wonder why
You
the
called the commissioner's
commissioner's
office and he said
secretary.
he's out for lunch?
Yes.
He's on Tinian right now. And I wouldn't lie, he's on Tinian
When did he fly out?
this morning.
Do you know when he will be back?
I am not sure.
Thank you. At this time, members, I call for a 10-minute recess. And if we can meet in the house, the conference room, please. Thank you. We will now rise back into our committee meeting. So before we went on recess, we wanted to clarify certain information that the committee was receiving. And so with that, while we were unable to get some clarification on certain things, what's going to happen is that we'll proceed with the questioning, and should the representatives from DPS not be able to answer some of those questions, we will go for a recess and come back on Friday at 1 p.m. to get the responses to those questions. I recognize Rep. Pavalta.
Mr. Chairman, I think you need to look at the schedule. I have a JDO meeting at 2 p.m.
Was that moved from 10?
It was always at 2 p.m. Yeah. Because I need the legal counsel.
Oh, so it wasn't.
All right, so we can do 12:30, and then an hour and a half before GGL takes over the meeting. And should we need additional information, we can either reschedule or go to another recess.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, I recognize.
thank you. I think the morning on Friday is free too, since,
But we
Oh,
will
but we
need
need
to
the
check with
council.
council.
okay. Okay, so 12:30 then, got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we hope that on Friday that the commissioner will be able to join us then. And if not, then the committee will decide on Friday how to proceed, depending on the responses you're able to bring back in regards to their line of questioning. If that's okay with you and the members, we'll proceed with the first round of questioning. Up next, we have Representative Sheila Peralta.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, ladies, Director Enos, De La Guerrero, and De Los Reyes. Thank you for being here. I too am disappointed that the commissioner isn't here himself, or the Director of Police too, but I do really appreciate your presence here, helping us understand the budget requests from the department. I firmly believe that the Department of Public Safety is a pillar and is essential to a successful community. So I completely support the department in improving our department, you know, just representing our people well, and realizing that, gosh, over 90% of our men and women in blue are indigenous, are Carolinian Chamorro. And so those are things that I keep in mind every time I think of DPS. So I have a couple of questions about your budget submission and the governor's response to it. And I'm just gonna go down the line and begin. The first is about utilities. There is a request for about $400,000 for utilities. That's about 4% of your budget, which I think is very low. But can you just describe your infrastructure? So that these utilities will go towards infrastructure for DPS buildings, and is this just for Saipan? And the state of affairs of your infrastructure, can you just help us understand that?
The utilities pay for utilities costs for all the buildings in DPS Central, and then our satellite offices in Garapan, Capitol Hill, Park East, and the sectors.
And the sector?
Yes, we currently have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sectors in the different villages.
These are the Coban stations?
Yes.
Okay. And is 408,000 enough for the entire fiscal year?
we try to make it enough.
Okay.
We also have logistics that follow up on trying to cut costs. When they leave the offices, they have to turn on the air conditioners, with the exception of the 24-hour front desk.
So you have locations in other places on Saipan, right, in addition to Central?
Yes.
And I am aware of the Coban station in San Roque.
Yeah.
So who keeps track of, all of these different locations? There is one in Garapan, the Coban Garapan, that kind of looks abandoned. The one in San Roque, I was told that there are 2 police officers stationed there, but that also sometimes, doesn't look like there's a strong presence of police officers at that location. So who does that fall under? Just to also ensure that they're abiding by some utility.
That falls under the Director of Police.
Okay.
They are basically part of the patrol shifts.
I see.
The sectors are open 24 hours, manned by, if I'm not mistaken, 2 people in the daytime and then 1 at night. I'm not sure, I need to make sure.
Okay.
Garapan is not the one at the sale.
Okay,
They're
that's
the one.
no longer.
Yeah, no, the Coban station is at the
Oh, yes.
Lower Mija.
Housing.
Yes.
Okay, and, but is there still equipment stored at the Garapan Paseo location? I think there were bicycles in there.
Yeah, I think they're gone already.
Okay.
Yeah, because,
So no longer at that
no.
Paseo. Okay, my next question is in regards to, professional services. You have a line item budget for professional services. And that really just stood out to me because we have 0 for personnel training. So can you first expand on what kind of professional services the department needs? And it is for almost, every division. For DPS admin, you have about 20,000. For, let's see, professional services, 6,000. For DPS police, what kind of professional services are needed?
It could be for translation services or for the website maintenance, email,
I see. Yeah, those are definitely,
yeah, it's
things
not
we
part
have
of,
to fund.
yeah, training is not included there.
So where's training listed? Because on every division here, there's 0. For
Yeah,
training.
we don't, it's costly, the training to be in there. So what we usually do is we conduct in-house or in-service training. One, the other one is we get training from, let's say we get a federal grant to train for crime prevention or the drug abuse resistance education.
Got it.
Or traffic section that trains on the car seat programs and the SFST. God, I forgot. Field sobriety test.
Got it. So in service training, you have your senior police officers trained.
We have trained trainers.
Trained
So
trainers.
yeah, so they usually go for training to be trainers.
Oh,
So they
that's
come
great.
here and train the rest of the officers.
So how often are our police officers trained?
It's usually annually. There's no funding locally for that. Wherever we find funding, we send them off to.
So training is something that I completely support. I really want our officers, men and women,
So do
to be
I.
at the to be at really at the level that we deserve, that we all deserve, that they deserve. I want us to invest in them. I want us to have a line item for training, and I'm really just not satisfied with this line item because I think it's so important, especially for our police force, to be up to date on everything, regulations that are always consistently changing, laws that are being passed, right? Like how do our officers know about the most current laws that are passed and their part in enforcing that law? I think training is so important, and I'm going to advocate for training, a training budget for DPS. But I know that you two would like that for our men and women, and so I would just like to see that on the department's request too, at least, right? Like the request that you make is a request, and then the governor's office, they respond accordingly. But I believe we should always have funding for training. So, but you know, I'm glad to hear that you do in-service training, that you have trained trainers, and at least we're finding some creative ways to get our men and women trained. Okay, so some of the other line items that were cut are the confidential informants fund. Can you just elaborate on that? There was a big cut on that under the Saipan DPS police division. The department requested for 100,000. You got a 50% cut and only allocated 50,000. Can you just expand on what that fund is and how the department will be impacted by a 50% cut?
The confidential informant funds are funds used to pay confidential informants.
Okay.
And majority of these are, you know, for, let's say, the Drug Enforcement Task Force.
Yeah.
We try to get funding for the Drug Enforcement Task Force somewhere else. We usually, before we were allocated, I think roughly 200 to 300,000 a year from the local funds.
Wow.
You know, so if we, you know, it was zeroed out totally the previous year.
Right, right.
So, you know, we try to help them out. I mean, if we already have the equipment, what do you need? You know, so we just put that in there.
Okay. And so the confidential informant is mostly drug related?
Mostly.
Yeah. Well, drugs are a major issue, right, for our community. So we definitely need these informants. Okay. So just going down the line item, we have judgments against the government. That also took a 50% cut. Can you just speak to us about what judgments against the government look like? What is under that line item? What kind of judgments do we have against our department?
So let's say we had a couple lawsuits we set out the year before, and I'm not sure, but I thought it was my understanding that there was an account to pay for these judgments. But if not, then I'm assuming they gave it to the government, I mean the department, since it's on our budget. So, you know, it could be any case against a police officer that we lost, or, you know, against the department itself. So we use that to pay.
I see. Well, I think that is a good question too that you bring up, because I too thought that would be paid from like an overall general fund, and for that line item to be included in the department's budget might be something that we can clarify. Okay, thank you for that. And then the repairs and maintenance line item, you do have that under Saipan DPS Police, DPS Motor Vehicle at 11,000. Police is around 50,000. Is this for vehicles, repairs and maintenance for vehicles, or is this for building, you know, building repairs? Everything. So that definitely seems insufficient and a very low amount. But the department only made that request. Is that something that you find to go over budget every year?
Yeah.
So repairs and maintenance. Okay. According to your citizen-centric report, 2021, thank you for providing the most updated citizen-centric report on your website. The allotted amount to DPS was around 3.9 million, and the amount expended was around 10.4 million. Can you just expand on where this funding came from? I know that Chairman did ask earlier about the revolving fund and whether those funds are used to supplement a shortfall in the department's budget, but this is like millions and millions. Can you Can you please just share that with us? If we do some math.
Majority of that funding or that $10 million is, so majority of the expenses last year are COVID related.
Okay,
We will be getting reimbursements for that.
yeah.
So far, we've only had like 650,000 reimbursement. And that's
Wow.
only from March to May.
Okay, so according to the math, you're about like 6.4 million over the allotted amount. And if you're expecting 650,000 to be reimbursed for, did you say January to May?
March to May, when
March
COVID
to May.
Yeah, March to May.
Got it. Would you say that around 6 million is COVID related?
A lot of it is also the same. You know, we've had problems, right, with the personnel. So 4 million itself is already not enough to pay personnel.
Mm.
So there were gonna be cuts and all of those things, but you do need police officers.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you do.
so,
That's why I'm glad to hear that there's an academy, because the shortage in police officers means overtime, right? And I know that, you know, many of our police officers, they value overtime. They want to work overtime to make more money, but that really just means more work time and less time at the home, you know? So if we can just increase their pay so that they can just work 8 hours a day and spend the rest of their time with their families, they wouldn't have to be working 12, 13-hour shifts. Which brings me into the salaries of your police officers, right? Our police officers. I mean, I see dispatchers make, some of them 12,000, 13,000 a year. That's full-time, no?
No, entry level is 15,000.
For entry level
Yeah.
DPS.
Yeah, well, that's because that's the minimum wage.
Yeah. And then you have some police one officer positions at 19,000,
Police officer one's entry level is 21,000.
21,000.
Yeah.
So these numbers are not up to date.
I think those are 80%,
80%.
I see.
because we were budgeted 80% per employee in
I
the budget.
And so can you speak to the wage grade increase, that within grade increase? Is that something that you're expecting for our police officers?
Yeah, so in the last year, we have reallocated, actually all the officers have been reallocated.
Okay. What does that mean? I'm sorry. They've been reallocated?
Hold on.
Okay. And I just wanted to ask, while you just prepare that, because under DPS, Saipan DPS Police, the department requested 6.4 million, but is only going to be given 5.3 million. That's the combined governor's proposal and ARPA funding. So that's a decrease in over $1 million, and that's for personnel. So, you know, we're cutting the personnel under DPS Police, but we want to increase salaries. And then you're saying some officers have been reallocated, which is something I need a little more help understanding.
Reallocation is reclassifying somebody to a higher position. So from a police officer one to a police officer two.
Promotion.
Yes, promotion basically. So these officers have been promoted.
Okay.
Some of them, actually, it's across the board that you don't choose. You all get satisfactory evaluations, then you get promoted. And this has been a long time coming. Really.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Had sergeants for 20 years.
Yes. So they've had the promotions, the increased responsibility, but not the pay increase.
So if there is money, there is a pay increase. If not, they sign something that says will get it when you have money.
I know, which I completely do not agree with,
Yeah.
right? I think if you're gonna increase my responsibility, please compensate me fairly. Like that only makes sense. I don't even think anywhere in the private sector, someone would even accept that. I just don't agree with that, right? Like, I don't think that's proper HR practices to say, we're gonna give you increased responsibility, but we're gonna pay you later, right? So right now, as of today, do we have all of our police officers being paid fairly for the work that they are doing? Are they all at their pay levels are matching their responsibility levels?
As far as I'm concerned, yes, they are.
Okay, so everyone who has gotten promoted has gotten that salary match.
Yeah, they have.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear. I hope that we can see that, in writing. I know that I have spoken with OPM, and there were WGIs pending, and so you bring up evaluations. Can you talk to us about evaluations? Because evaluations are costly, right? Like, we need to ensure that that the pay increases match the qualifications of the officer, right? And so the evaluations that happen, can you talk to us about that? What goes into evaluating a police officer, and how often are they evaluated?
Each employee is evaluated annually.
Okay.
If there are, let's say, regulations stating that, or holding back or suspending WGIs, we still have to evaluate the employee.
Right.
So every year, an employee has their immediate supervisor conduct an evaluation on them. That goes into the jacket. We don't necessarily have to give the WGI, especially in the last, or they've recently picked it up, but how many years did they suspend it?
Right.
So people have been going without WGIs.
Right.
Yeah. So when the officers were reallocated, they were reallocated to a position where they should have been. And it comes with the responsibilities, and they have been performing.
Yeah. So the evaluations are the responsibility of the immediate supervisor.
Yes.
And then is submitted to
their director, and then the commissioner.
And then the commissioner. And in these evaluations, is it a standard evaluation for all divisions?
Yes.
And that includes what? Like,
it's a standard government. It comes from OPM. Your quality work and your time, and so it comes from OPM, and we feel that out. We didn't create our own.
And you don't create your own?
No.
Have you considered creating your own? Just because DPS is like a completely different department that is made up of, all these people that we depend on. It's our police force is
we're still a central government agency, so we have to follow OPM.
Yes, in addition.
And we can do it internally.
Right.
Yeah, but then, officially, and what we report is the evaluation tool from OPM.
I see. Okay. I believe in evaluations. I believe in performance reviews. I think feedback is a gift. If we can let someone know what areas they need to work on to become better, I think that is just a gift, right? Like, no one would tell me, I would never know if no one told me, right? And so we have that responsibility as leaders to let our team know what they need to work on to become better at their job. And with the mission of DPS to provide the highest quality of public safety service in order to enhance community safety, protect life and property, and reduce crime and the fear of crimes, right? Evaluations are essential. And so I would highly recommend that on top of OPM's evaluation, that the department include their own, because our police officers have different expectations of that of someone else who's working at a desk, like at the Department of finance or at procurement or labor, DPS has a different standard because your mission is completely different and very important to the safety, health, and welfare of our community. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield at this time. I am just trying to be mindful of my time allotted, so thank you for your indulgence. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Rep. Avanta. Before I give the floor back to the members, just a couple of clarifying questions here. According to the second quarter report from the Secretary of Finance, the total expenditure from DPS alone amounts to 2.8 million. Is that something that, does that figure match with what you have?
I need to see that. Sorry, I don't know. I need to see the page.
So if I were to ask you how much in expenditures did the department incur in the second quarter, what figure would that be?
I wouldn't. I need to go back and take a look at it because these are different expenditures for different funding sources. So we have our own balance sheets for each fund. General fund?
Yes.
We have not spent, the only thing we spend on general fund is salary.
Okay, and
And
how much is that
fuel.
amount?
I need to get it.
Do you know how much in salary was incurred in the second quarter?
No, I need to take a look at it.
Do you know what your fuel expenses were in the second quarter?
Second quarter fuel expenses is around 30 to 35,000 a month. So maybe around 100,000 for 3 months.
Okay, so that, I guess that's something that you can bring back on Thursday, on Friday. Again, your total appropriations for the second quarter based on the fiscal year 2021 budget, DPS was appropriated 1.2 million. According to the Secretary of Finance's second quarter report, there's a total expenditure of 2.8 million. And so if you can provide the committee with the breakdown of this 2.8, how much of this was for personnel and how much was for operations? And even the breakdown of these operations, if there's something in addition to fuel. Moving on to the well-being of our public safety officers, how often is counseling being provided to our officers?
Counseling is available the entire time. We've had a counselor on board who conducts like presentations, and she always makes herself available for these officers who want to seek counseling.
So this
We don't
is
force it on them.
but this is under
DPS.
DPS and not
Yes.
through any other independent
No.
program. Whenever an officer is involved in situations that may need counseling services, do you require them to perform or to go through these counseling services before allowing them to report back to regular duty?
Like what instances, I mean,
If there's a homicide or there's a domestic violence or wherever physical interaction, physical confrontation is involved with the officer and a suspect, or do you require them to undergo any counseling before they get reinstated back into their normal duties?
I believe so. I need to check. I've heard from officers who, so what happens is when you say get, or they're put on administrative duty, they're required to see the counselor and go through whatever before you're being stated back into the police force, or before you roll out, I guess. So I believe that they do require it.
Believe, but you're not 100%.
I'm not. I need to check.
What about drug testing? How often is that performed?
We do it twice a year, and it's mandatory for the entire department. We just had ours 2 months ago. So usually in earlier in the year, and then before the end of the year.
So it's done when the drug testing is performed, they do it all at one time with all
Yes.
the officers?
Actually, it's like 2 days.
In a
It's
span of 2
like
days.
200 some employees.
So it's not too random. It's not random drug testing.
They do conduct random drug testing, but as for mandatory testing, we do that like twice a year. Everybody.
And what is is it a zero tolerance workplace?
Huh?
Zero tolerance workplace? If an officer were to be found under the influence? Or do
You're
they go
asking what we
through
do when,
when an officer is found with or being under the influence?
well, if I am not mistaken, I believe they're grounded and then they go through suspension, sometimes even termination. That's dependent on how much. But then again, I'm just saying this, and it's not really up to me. It goes to investigation, to the internal affairs, and then to the commissioner.
So ultimately, it's the commissioner that makes the determination.
And I believe OPM, so we do this drug testing through OPM. And I believe, so when they're found positive, they're sent to CGC also. And again, it depends on how many times, or I guess the magnitude of the positive result. So you could be suspended for 30 days, or you could be asked to resign or terminated.
So but they can come back into. They can go back into work after they've completed.
I'm not sure. It's all dependent on your
The severity and
yes.
the commissioner. Going back to the funding request that Rep. Abata brought up in regards to training. Can you just further clarify why hasn't the department requested funds for training?
Usually, we request for we request for funding for operational cost. For example, fuel. We cannot work without fuel, or the officers cannot go out without fuel. Utilities, communications. Those are the things we usually ask for, and we ask for a little side, like for professional services. It's very costly for training costs, or for us to ask for training costs. I mean, I could put it in, but I know that it's going to be very hard to fund. But then again, that's up to you. And if you like, I will put it in.
Right.
That is the only reason why.
Yeah. I mean, supplies. I mean, your request for supplies is at 182,000, and this is not fuel. This is not.
No, that's
Professional
operations,
services.
right? Supplies operations. That's
Yes.
for firearm, ammunitions, uniforms, all those things. So fire ammunitions, you need to certify these officers every year.
So what you're saying is that the training for firearms is under a separate category?
No, we have a certified firearms instructor, too. And every year they conduct firearms recertifications. To do that, we need to give them ammunition, and ammunition is costly. For each recertification, it's around $20,000 in ammunition only.
Okay, so when we come back on Friday, the committee would appreciate if you can look through training opportunities. Sorry, I'm just looking at 2020. Nothing was provided for training in 2020. Nothing was provided in 2019. And so I hope the members share this sentiment that, you know, it is important that we can continue to provide our safety officers with the much needed training, you know, and the resources to help them perform their duty and their job to keep our Commonwealth safe and secure, and all the other things that they swore to do, and they can't do that if the department is not providing them with these resources. And so if you can come back on Friday, recalculate and assess what are some of the trainings and recertifications that our men and women in blue would need in order to meet the standards that, you know, across the nation, then that's something that the committee can consider and would deliberate upon. And so yeah, thank you. With that said, I will hold a second round, but I will ask members to limit their questions and reserve some of them for Friday. However, if you feel that there are questions that the three representatives might not be able to answer, that they are aware of the kind of questions that they can provide the answers on Friday, that would be helpful. And so with that, with the kicking off the second round, I will hand the floor over to Rep. Nizama.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Second round, of course, overtime, money spent. I have a case that is sitting at the CIB for over 3 years and has not been closed. Overtime, spent, no result. How far back do you have in DPS records that crimes have been resolved? How far back? 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? You know, what is the reason? Are we lack on personnel? Do we need more training on the CIB and the investigators? So for that long, and there was leads provided to the CIBs. These are the people that did, no answer. What is the reason? Can you tell me that? If you can't answer today, please bring that answer back on Friday.
Well, you asked me to answer that?
You can, but if not, that be the answer that you need to bring back.
I can speak for the investigations. You know, they have their own reasons, but I could check with them when I get back and try to get information, and then we'll present it on Friday.
Going back to the first round, Rep. Benita.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, ladies. Just one simple question. You mentioned something about the vehicles, surveyed vehicles, right? So those are the ones that are like, that need repair. Is there any plan of making your own repair shop?
We want that.
Yeah.
We were discussing it, but I'm not sure. You know, we keep thinking it'll be cheaper to hire a mechanic. But it's a lot of issues. So let's say the oil, if you're gonna change oil, you know, you have to dispose of it correctly and all of those things. But we brought it up and we're still discussing it. Because we're gonna need a shop, basically, that we don't have right now. We're gonna need a shop, we're gonna need people to man it, we're gonna need materials and for the repair. And I don't think that I'm just not sure that the government can support it. It's very costly to,
I'm thinking it will be cheaper than,
probably,
yeah, taking it to other shops. But, okay, thank you.
but we're discussing it.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Yanktamai. For the second round, members, I recognize Rep. Sablan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did anyone test hot during the last drug test round a couple months ago?
I believe two.
Two did. And then the process that was followed after that was what?
Suspension, and then I know they were required to undergo treatment or counseling at CGC, and then I'm not sure what happens after that. Or
But they remain on the force though, as they're going through treatment?
Yes.
Okay. And do you have any police officers currently on staff with either pending criminal cases or criminal convictions?
I believe there are no officers or employees with criminal convictions. I believe. I don't know of anybody. Pending cases, probably. And, but I'm not really sure.
Is this something that the HR director tracks?
Actually, sorry. Actually, our internal affairs tracks those, with regards to officers that has, like pending conditions. There's no one that has that one right now.
No one with pending cases?
Convictions, but
Or
cases,
Not with convictions. but
No one with
maybe
convictions.
Pending cases, yes.
and those officers are on administrative duty.
Okay.
There's not a lot of them. So, you know, it could be, let's say, I'm not saying it is, but it probably could be DUI. And if you were arrested or, you know, cited for DUI, you're on administrative duty right now until your case gets resolved.
Okay. Okay. And you said there's a couple that, but you don't have that data, only
No.
internal affairs. Okay. And then I also was curious about transfers or reassignments. DPS is kind of notorious for that, where officers are moved from CIB to patrol to, you know, narcotics, boating safety, and who ultimately makes that decision? And what's the process for moving an officer who's been an investigator for so many years to admin or wherever?
Well, it could be a discussion between, let's say, the director and the commissioner. Or maybe director one here needs help, so I reassign some of the admin staff over there. Or you need more people to conduct driving tests. So you find where there's a lot of officers and you temporarily assign them there, or you need officers at SWAT or RRT, Rapid Response Team, so you send officers there. These transfers are made based on the need. At least it's my understanding. It's based on the need. So if you're transferred somewhere, or it might be because you requested to transfer them. You know, I don't know.
Okay, so if we wanted to see the record of, transfers that are done from one division to the next over time, would we get that information from HR?
Could be HR. I think it's also in the commissioner's office.
Commissioner's office. Okay.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's up to the commissioner to decide where to assign.
In the end, and most recently, I believe he allowed the directors to move people within their divisions.
Okay.
Based on what they think or who they feel need more officers or not.
Oh, so that wouldn't require his approval, the directors?
If he says that you can move them on your own.
Okay.
Yeah, but otherwise, when he's still part of the, I guess you see the copy, and or he probably discussed it beforehand, and they asked him, is it okay to do this? And basically, it's a team discussion with him. You don't just move somebody.
Okay, and then going back to Representative Sheila's question from your citizen-centric report, I think you mentioned DPS has received $600,000 for COVID-19 reimbursements. That was between March to May last year, right? So how much is the department still expecting for reimbursement?
A lot. We were not able to submit project worksheets. I don't know why. I don't know what the delay is. In fact, this 600,000 sum, if I'm not mistaken, we only received it this year.
Oh, wow.
Submitted in May, received this year. So so we've already done another worksheet for contracts, I guess, let's say food costs, overtime costs. Overtime cost is the biggest cost. We've submitted, or we've prepared to submit 12-day periods worth, which is about 24 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how much does that add up to then? That you're
Uh,
still expecting for reimbursement?
So they say 4.5 months, 4.5, March, April, May, 4.5 day periods. And then some contracts, that's around 600,000. So you have, let's say, 3 more pay period. 3 more of those 4 months. So it could be over $1 million. We're expecting for this next one. And then we still have from pay period 1 to pay period 13, which is this current pay period that we need to request reimbursement for. So it shows in there that the money that we've spent it, and that's only authorized by SOF because he knows that we're gonna get it reimbursed. And we don't do anything that we know will not be reimbursable.
Okay, so it was like the Secretary of Finance then that authorized DPS to go over its allotted budget because most of these expenditures were COVID related?
Yes.
Okay.
And we're slowly, the CNMI, it's my understanding the CNMI government is slowly receiving reimbursements for all costs. They do this through the Public Assistance Office. With DPS, we do it on our own and then request it on our own because we paid them ahead of time through our local account. So we've reimbursed that one. I'm not sure, I don't think that shows in the centric report.
Okay, yeah, maybe if you could bring, I guess, more detailed information about what you're expecting, what have you submitted for,
Yeah, I can
how much does that, and I also like to better understand where the delays are in the project worksheets.
I think it's FEMA's side.
It's on FEMA's side?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, because I keep asking, so when are we gonna submit the project worksheet? They're still preparing it, and as soon as they open it up, then we can submit it.
Oh, so you have them ready, you just can't
Yes,
submit them yet
yes.
on the portal?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Well, thank you for clarifying that. And then I had another question about the police academy. So you're in the middle of a cycle now. What does a typical cycle cost?
So aside from the salary, so you need to pay for their physical training uniforms, their class uniforms, their training gears, shoes, hats. Then we go to NNC, so we need to get them books and all of those things. And that's only during the academy. We need to prepare for when they graduate. We need to buy them uniforms, and these are 30 police officers. Times how much in uniform per officer? Maybe like what, $1,000 per officer, and that's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we try to actually. So part of that we use the OIA money. So the top grant that they gave us for salary for 15 officers, and then they gave us 22,000 for operations, meaning their gear or we've used that
Okay.
to purchase their academy gear.
Okay.
And whatever remaining we have, we're gonna use to purchase their belts, which is costly itself.
Yeah. So whatever isn't covered by the TAP grant, then local funds will cover that.
If there is local funds.
Yeah. So it's like over 100,000 each.
Yes,
Wow. Okay.
very costly.
Yeah. And could you just explain what is the process for recruiting and vetting cadets?
So we submit the vacancy to OPM. They announce it. They have like 200 applicants. They have to filter or eliminate. So there are people who, let's say, so we have requirements. You pass the background test, okay. Whoever didn't pass, you need to get out. You take the English placement test. If you don't pass, you need to be removed. You have physical agility tests. If you don't pass, you're supposed to get out. And in the end, we have the interview. Of course, we can't give everybody, we can't hire everybody. But so many people want to be police officers, and some people just want a job. We do what we can.
Okay. So, but it's OPM that oversees
Yes.
the process, and then DPS conducts the interviews.
Yes.
That's when they get to that point.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for explaining that. And then finally, I had a couple of questions for our BMV director. Is BMV still observing COVID-19 hours?
So yeah, they're open 8:30 to 11 in the morning, and then 1 to 3 in the afternoon.
Okay. And can I just ask, because we do get quite a lot of complaints about the inconvenience of the hours, the long lines often, and when does BMV anticipate returning to normal hours, normal office operations? I'm assuming that most, if not all, of your staff are already vaccinated, correct? So what is the plan for returning to normal operations?
You want to answer that? Oh, so we recently moved or relocated motor vehicle. We're still trying to fully, so we have the Real ID program. It needs to be secured. So we've done that. We've contracted a super tech to transfer their security to the new building, which is actually the old courthouse. So they're there now. They still cannot fully open right now. They're also, and then this vaccination, people getting vaccinated, all the DPS employees are vaccinated. But still, you don't want people sitting next to each other and yet one of them is not vaccinated, and so we're still trying to do that, but we're getting there to opening up fully.
Is there a timeline for opening fully?
I'm not sure. There's just so many things happening right now. There's still, so I don't know if you've been to the new BMV. It's a lot bigger, and they've remodeled it so that it's easier for the clients to come in and do their business or whatever. And so there's the vessel or vehicle registration portion. then there's the driver's license portion.
Right.
And we do apologize for the inconvenience, but it's something we just need to be careful with our employees as well as the community, especially motor vehicle. There's always a lot of people,
Yeah.
always.
Yeah.
We can never do social distancing there unless we, physically tell them you need to line up, which actually has been happening for a while, but I don't think they do that anymore, right? Because they drop. So like vehicle registrations, you just complete all the requirements and you just drop it and pick it up next day.
Right. That's been the protocol for a while,
Yes.
since last year. Right?
Yeah.
So so no timeline for when that might change.
Soon.
Soon.
Yeah, and it's something we can discuss when we get back.
Sure.
We can discuss that.
And then that brings me to my last question. There is a lot of ARPA money, as you know, from the American Rescue Plan Act to digitize, and the Secretary of Finance talked about that during his presentation last Friday, and to bring the CNY government into the 21st century. And a lot of questions have been asked about, can we get certain government processes online, like vehicle registration, like renewing your driver's license, and so that people can pay for these services and make these requests online. I know I did it in Hawaii. I think a bunch of us in the States have done it as well. What is the prospect for that? Is that in your budget? Is that in the plan?
No, it's not. It's not in our budget, and you're talking about the munis, right? Where they're going to change the central government's accounting system, which includes purchase requests and everything.
I mean, that's one thing, but also for like the government services, like driver's license renewal.
So yeah, we were talking about that, and they don't do that. So we were looking into it, but if we're gonna do that, there needs to be actual funding just for that.
Yeah.
Because we can't really start it and then just drop it in the middle because it's not enough money. Or basically, we're in that mode where there's, we usually, when we don't have money, we ask if we can get assistance.
$500 million coming here. So, what I would suggest, like the administration right now is working on a revised budget submission, including revisions for the American Rescue Plan Act. And, maybe that could be a life changer for some of DPS's processes, right? And if there's money for it, if you can at least put in the request, maybe we can make that happen sooner. Thank you. I yield, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Blunt. I now recognize Rep. Sheila Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, ladies, for still being here with us. Just in the interest of time, I'm going to make it quick. Thank you to Rep. Tina for bringing up transfers. That's what I really wanted to ask you about. And we can just be realistic about transfers. It has been used as a way to retaliate against our police officers. And so I too would like to see a list of how often police officers are transferred, because there's a cost to that. If we have a police officer in the Department of, say, Boating Safety, we have invested in that police officer certain types of training. And when we pluck that police officer out of that division and to an entirely new division, now the training will have to happen all over again, right? And so there is a cost to transferring of employees. This is a basic HR item, right? Transfers and cost of transfers. And so I am curious to know whether you take that into consideration when transfers are being requested, whether by the police officer or by the director or by whomever. Is there a cost that is calculated? Because there is. There is a cost. And so I too would like to see that list of transfers. And if not, if there isn't a policy in place to calculate the cost of a transfer, I highly recommend that the department do that, because a transfer can be denied due to the cost. And this also goes back to training, because yes, we need to train our police officers, but we also need to train the admin, the HR staff. Really, you're at the heart of the department, running everything, processing paperwork, right? Reviewing timesheets, like even up-to-date training on the most up-to-date technology, whatever will help you do your job and make it easier, will help everybody else. So I just wanted to comment on that. I wanted to ask about your citizen-centric report, and this is for this is the one that was available on OPA's website. But the number of cases, this is going back to Rep. Lizama's concern about, cases and open cases. The number of closed cases by the department was 28, and the number of forwarded cases to the AG's office is at 501. What happens to those cases that are forwarded?
It's not, it's the AG that has.
So
to
it's
answer
just
that.
forwarded
So when
and
we
then
forward
it's
it,
off
it
there.
ends, yeah,
I see.
it ends there.
Okay. But it's still considered like open or closed?
Yeah, it probably could still be open because it probably hasn't been adjudicated yet.
I see.
But, we've done investigations and then we forward it over there and then you're gonna follow it up, you have to follow it up with the AG.
If
Or
that's your
wait for
case.
the court. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Well, then that's a good thing then. And then my last question is in regards to overtime, because, we talk about overtime a lot of the expenses incurred comes from overtime. Is overtime an opportunity that's available to all of the police officers?
Yes,
And so,
except those that are assigned. Right now, it's available to all the officers because everybody does something for COVID. And before they did that, they got approved Cat Bs, which is a form that you have to submit to FEMA to get approved to do these COVID-related work. So they are available. And I don't want to make it seem as if we're just saying, go ahead and work, we're going to pay you OT, go ahead.
Right.
Every pay period, we have a wire down there regarding OT.
Right.
But at the end of the day, if we really have to do it, we do it.
Yeah. Okay. And my last question is in regards to vendors. So I was very happy to hear that, your vendors are up to date, your payments are up to date with the vendors, but how are our vendors chosen? And do we review our vendors? Because I was in a shop in the South Side. They were making the uniforms for DPS. And, we have been informed that some of the uniforms are not of standard quality. And, we want our officers, we want the department to be confident in themselves when they're out in public, confident in the uniforms that they're wearing, in the quality of the uniform. And so do we give our vendors feedback? And do we receive feedback from our vendors? How are the vendors ultimately chosen?
Well, it's a small island and there's not a lot of vendors out there for, it could be vehicle repair or uniform purchase, but you don't have to do it on island for it to be considered substandard too, because we've ordered off island and it's even worse.
Yeah.
So, we try, and usually when we go to a vendor that doesn't, fulfill our requirements, then we will no longer go there.
Yeah.
So, we work at GPS, but we're also shoppers.
Yeah.
We shop all over the place for, and then, we have those vendors that you request for this, and then it takes them 3 months to get 100 names.
Done.
Yeah, when we could have gotten it from the other person for in 2 weeks.
Right. So the list of vendors is kept with which division?
There's no list of vendors. You need names. Go and get quotation from the 3 vendors that usually sells names. Safety first, sprockets, safety management.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Okay. So clarified. Thank you so much. And to your comment earlier about a lot of people want to be police officers, I completely agree with you. Just recently, there was a kindergarten class that graduated, and the top answer of what I want to be when I grow up was police officer. That was the whole class. So, I respect the badge very much. I respect the department, and, we're really just here to help support the department become better every day.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Rev, about that. Going back to overtime, and I just want to hear it from you and get clarification from what's being said and brought to our attention. Do you have any administrative personnel or that work outside their normal 7:30 to 4:30 that is being paid overtime? If
Yes.
so, what's the reasoning behind that?
So because we do our own submission to FEMA, where this work was supposed to have been done from people out of the Public Assistance Office, we do everything. We do their times. There's a requirement from the federal government that we have to fill out. Then there's a requirement from the local Homeland Security, or I guess you could say the Emergency Operations Center, where we have to submit this. We calculate MVCRs, vehicle condition reports, and submit those. And I'll tell you that the MVCRs, when we did those for YouTube, that's what brought in the $1.4 million for DPS. Just the submission of those MVCRs, so you have officers going here and helping out here during the recovery. We got that $1.4 million from that. So before that, every logistical necessity for the department came from us. We didn't go through Homeland Security, where the other agencies did. We gave food to our officers, were the ones who delivered it, all of those things. So, there's just a lot of things that we still need to do.
But in essence, so you are working beyond your normal assigned duties because these responsible agencies are not moving quick enough.
No, because there was an agreement in the beginning with the SOF and Homeland Security that DPS will be the ones, I guess, preparing everything for DPS. Where everybody else got paid through Homeland Security, we got paid on our own. So whatever we paid on there, we request for reimbursement. Let's say for the Division of Customs, their request goes into Homeland Security. They pay them. Homeland Security puts the request into the Public Assistance Office. So Homeland Security doesn't request for reimbursement for anything that the DPS got.
So you go straight to the Public Assistance. Are there currently employees that are working outside these hours? Is it still going on?
Yes, they are, but it's not as much as it was before for all the employees. And we're slowly making changes. So let's say the officers that were assigned to the sites, they're no longer there. It's now one specific section of, I believe, 14 officers who are monitoring these sites. And I'm talking about the quarantine sites, the MCATs.
Sorry, I'm referring to administrative
yes.
personnel. Do you have the figure of how much the overtime for administrative personnel is?
I need to go in, I need to get that.
But these aren't listed under the COVID reimbursements, correct?
Yes, they are. They also have to submit Cat D forms.
For the administrative personnel?
Yes.
And it was approved?
Yes. The only difference here is that we submit our own. But even if we submit our own, I guess, project worksheet through FEMA, we still have to submit that to the local Public Assistance Office. Because when the reimbursement comes, it goes to them. Before they release it, they have to see all our documentation, which we provide them.
All right, thank you. So clarified. I'll go ahead and allow 2 more members for the second round.
I'll yield, Mr. Chairman, to party.
Okay. All right, members, with that, at this time, directors, thank you for taking the time to come in today. I understand that you, with the last minute absence of the commissioner, some of the questions that were asked today could not be addressed. And so with their members has agreed to go on recess until Friday to allow DPS to gather the information for some of the questions that were asked today in which the answers weren't given, as well as to see if the commissioner will be available on Friday at 12:30 p.m. If he's not able to make it, the committee appreciates anyone from DPS, whether it be any of you 3 or Mr. Ariola, to inform the committee whether the commissioner will be here or not. That way the committee can discuss how to proceed on Friday. So before we go on recess, I'd like to recognize Representative Peralta.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If there are no objections from the committee members, I'd like to request that DPS include voting safety. Please invite them over. We have a lot of questions for voting safety as well.
No objection.
And it seems like some questions were referenced to the Director of Police. If that individual can also join your team on Friday. So again, thank you, Ms. Enos, Ms. Longuerro, and Ms. Los Regis for your time today. We appreciate your presence. And so with that, members, can I get a motion for recess? All right, motion was made and seconded. We will go on recess until 12 p.m. on Friday.